Hello and welcome back to the Growing Up in Scientology YouTube channel. It's been a while since we put anything up, and so we figured it was about time. And we're going to continue our compare and contrast discussion on Growing Up in Scientology. So, since it's been a while since we put anything up, and there's a chance people watching this video haven't seen our other ones, just give a real quick refresher of the years that you were in Scientology. Just very briefly, you were born into Scientology in what year?
I got into Scientology when I was 6, when my parents got involved in like 1960 or 1961.
Okay.
And then I was on staff in the Sea Organization from 1973 until 2007.
Okay, great. And so my mom got into Scientology in like 1983 or 4 when I was 3 or 4 years old. I started working for the church in 1993 or late 1992. No, 1993, when I was 13. Actually, I was 12 when I started working for the church, and then worked for the church full-time up until 2006, when I was 26, and now here we are. Okay, so we've, I put a lot of questions together just on various subjects I wanted to discuss how growing up in Scientology affected how you thought about particular subjects.
Right.
We've gone through a whole bunch of those. Here's what I want to touch on next. What were you taught to think about LRH? Like, obviously, he's the founder of Scientology. What were you taught to think about him? Like, what he represented, what he meant, how he came to do what he did or be who he was? What was your general backstory of LRH?
I think but that there's sort of two aspects to that, Aaron.
Right.
One is, what was I taught by reason of, what would my parents say, or what would other Scientologists say when I was growing up, which there wasn't that much indoctrination into L. Ron Hubbard is this or L. Ron Hubbard is that, other than, he made great discoveries. Mm-hmm. That was kind of the, he's a great man who made great discoveries about the human condition and how to resolve it.
Right.
It was when I got into doing courses, and then particularly got into the Sea Org, that it became much more dogmatic that L. Ron Hubbard was the only answer, or found the only answers to mankind, was the only person that had managed to figure out the trap that everybody on this planet was in, was the only person that had a solution, and that anybody else who had come along either before him didn't really figure it out properly or solve it properly, or subsequent to him would come and try and meddle with his brilliant breakthroughs, and therefore were to be either ignored or, even worse, to be derided and attacked for being squirrels.
Right.
The idea that L. Ron Hubbard was, Hubbard said on a number of occasions, I'm just a man, I'm not a god, I'm not this, I'm not that. Somewhat tongue-in-cheek, frankly, because if you read a lot of what he wrote, he portrays himself as, I came here from some other planet to save mankind. I have found the only answers for all of man's problems, that I'm the only one who has made it through the wall of fire to solve and uncover the true nature of what's happened to man, etc., etc. That's what he said. And he insisted that people believe and subscribe to that idea, because you cannot be a dedicated Scientologist without doing so.
Right. So, what about, and maybe this became more applicable after you were in the Sea Org, and in the later years that you were in the Sea Org, what were you taught to think about why he was able to develop Dianetics and Scientology? What was unique about him?
I don't know that I was taught anything about that. It was just a fact, a given fact. He is the only one who has uncovered or managed to uncover the answers. He's the only one that's smart enough.
Right.
He's the only one that wasn't afflicted with man's inability to understand himself, or some
Well, like,
idea like that.
so at least in Christianity, you don't have to spend a lot of time wondering about something like that, because you can just go, oh, well, Jesus is the Son of God. Okay, good. Just chalk it up. Okay, good. We don't have to question it beyond that. But at least there's something to fill in the gap.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So even if it was something that wasn't like officially written down as far as, well, this is why LRH could codify Dianetics and Scientology, was there an impression that you came away with? That this answers that question. Why are we following one man? Why are we following the words of one man? Yes, he wrote a bunch of great stuff, but then why put so much weight into this? Or was there, or something you came up with on your own to sort of answer that question?
I mean, I think for me it was something that I came up with on my own, putting together all these other pieces of information, and, you know, somehow, like when you get to OT3, there is some sort of implication that he was the leader of the rebels who fought against Xenu and had loyal officers following along with him, or something like that. But it's all kind of vague.
Right.
I don't really know.
All right. Fine.
What's your answer to these questions? You're like interrogating me.
No. Okay. So I'll tell you. And I'm going to jump ahead of my bullet points. Because I remember,
No, you have to answer this one.
No, I mean, in order to answer this question, I've got to jump ahead of my bullet points. Because I remember somewhat struggling with this around 12 or 13 years old. Not in an important way, but in a, am I supposed to think about this way? But what about this question? And when I first read The Hymn of Asia, or when I first heard a Scientologist mention that LRH had been Buddha, and then I read Hymn of Asia, where LRH basically says, I am Buddha, I am the Maitreya, whatever. I'm not familiar enough with that religion to understand if that's even an accurate interpretation of it. But he basically says, I am the reincarnation of Buddha, I have come to finish his work, and have done so with Dianetics and Scientology. For me, in a funny way, that was just the thing that made me go, oh, okay, I can put this to rest.
I get it.
Because the entire world recognizes Buddhism as a legitimate religion, and by and large a peaceful one, and I think there's a general consensus that Buddha was a good person.
Who helped civilize the world.
Right. And I was like, oh, okay, good. That answers that question. Let's move on. If you can be like, oh, Jesus was the Son of God. Oh, okay, LRH was Buddha. I mean, fine. But that's something Scientology never publicizes. They never publicize LRH was Buddha. That we do teach the flock, kind of unofficially, that LRH was Buddha. Because technically that book, Hymn of Asia, is not an official book of Scientology. I mean, would you disagree with that statement?
Well, it's not, okay, it's not considered to be scripture. That would be how they would differentiate it.
Because it wasn't written as a policy letter or as a bulletin. It's
correct. And it's not
book.
written as a piece of Scientology technology or Scientology policy of how you administer an organization.
Right.
It's a poem.
Right. It's a long-ass poem.
A long-ass poem. But it's published by the publications orgs, and it's sold in Church of Scientology bookstores.
It is. Although, I'm guessing probably harder to get these days.
I have no idea. I
And-
haven't been in one for a while.
And even though it's published by the Scientology publication arm, I'm willing to bet it doesn't have the little Dianetics and Scientology symbol on it, like all the other Scientology books do.
I actually don't know, Aaron.
Yeah.
I've probably got a copy of it at home. I can go look.
So, so for me, that's kind of the answer to the question, how were you taught to think of LRH? Because growing up, you were not taught to believe that he was a prophet of any kind. You were not taught to believe that he was a god of any kind. You were not taught to believe anything other than he's just a really smart guy who sort of found the way, and there might be many different ways to achieve spiritual freedom, but as long as you found the one way, you're crazy to try anything else. Like, there might be many ways to get there, but if you have the one way, and many people walk this path, then trying to get off the path is basically a destructive effort. And just do what he said, because it's been proven to work, and so many people have walked that route.
Exactly.
And then again, it wasn't later when it was like, oh, LRH was Buddha. Oh, okay, great. So, well, was Buddha a god? Because at that young age, and to be honest, I might not still know the right answer. Do Buddhists consider Buddha to be... how did they answer the question of, well, why did Buddha... Why was he able to figure this out? Or, Gautama Siddhartha, I'm going to get all this wrong. Like, I don't know how they answer that question, but for me, thinking that Buddha was kind of a god, I was like, oh, okay, so we're a religion, and you don't have to call L. Ron Hubbard a god, but if he was Buddha and Buddha was a god, okay, we're all good. We're all square.
Yeah, well, Buddhists do not consider that Buddha was a god.
And
right. They consider that he managed to, and this is one of these parallels with Scientology, he managed to discover the path to spiritual freedom through self-enlightenment.
Right.
And this is a lot of the play that Scientology puts on people about how you are going to achieve your own spiritual freedom through your own self-enlightenment, just like Buddha.
Right. In fact, I remember thinking how appropriate it was that was the reincarnation story, because in that way, Scientology is kind of similar to Buddhism. It's the religion without a god. I'm not making that claim. That's what Buddhism is, because I don't truly understand it. But but that's how I equated it. Oh, another religion without a god. Oh, this is a religion without a god. Oh, this story. I can swallow this one. Okay, let's see. So we covered, was LRH Buddha? Was LRH some sort of god? Was everyone striving to be like LRH? Do you feel like, what's your thought on that as far as people in Scientology? I've heard a criticism that Scientology is really, everyone's just trying, the pitch is be more yourself, be your own person, find out who you truly are, but really as you kind of ascend up the training and auditing levels, you're really just becoming more like LRH.
Well, I'm not sure about sending up the auditing and training levels. I mean, there is a dicta in Scientology, which is, if you don't know the answer, do what Ron says. Mm-hmm. And that is a much more heavily pounded in dogma than think for yourself.
Right.
It really is.
What would Ron do?
Think for yourself is a marketing slogan. What would Ron do, or do what Ron says, are dictates.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even in the training films. There's one training film I can think of in particular where there's an actor pretending to be L. Ron Hubbard, and there's an actor pretending to be one of his messengers, and then there's two conversations amongst messengers, and one of them just looks to the other and is like, when in doubt, just do what Ron would do. Now, growing up in Scientology, I was never exposed. I'd never heard of the "What would Jesus do?" Right? Because that's a thing, right? What would Jesus do?
I don't know.
That's it. It's a thing. But it's also a thing in Scientology. What would Ron do? Do what Ron would do. And when I actually saw that, like on a bumper sticker for the first time, "What would Jesus do?" I was like,
"Oh, they cheated.
I was like,
they stole Ron's
Are they stealing that from us?" So on the one hand, it's funny, are they stealing that from us? But on the other hand, it's like, but if that was theirs, why are we doing what would Ron do? If the Christians said, what would Jesus do? We're sort of treating him like a Jesus. It was, just a little thing, a blip on the radar when I saw the "What would Jesus do?" Bumper sticker. Okay, that was striving to be like LRH. How to LRH achieve full OT. I feel like we've kind of covered some of that on previous videos. I don't want to rehash all that.
Right.
Okay, well, were you taught that LRH was able to, at will, leave his body, be exterior from his body as a Thetan, as a spiritual being, go wherever, do whatever, see whatever, know whatever, which is really what Scientologists are trying to achieve by becoming full OT, full operating Thetan. I mean, I think that's a safe thing to say, that people's main hope is that they're going to achieve the ability to causatively and at will exteriorize from your body, and your body's still alive, but exteriorize, just go wherever you want, do whatever you want, keep your body alive, animate your body from a distance, and there's a carryover to that ability of then not forgetting what happens in the between lives area, not forgetting your past lives, being able to retain your memory for eternity, which is really what Scientologists mean when they say regain your eternity. It means regaining your ability to remember for eternity. Because Scientologists already believe that things live forever.
Right. So it's actually regaining your past.
Regaining your past and your ability to continually remember.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
Did you grow up believing that LRH had attained that level of ability of just being able to causatively exteriorize from the body at will?
Believing it, yes. Did anybody ever really tell me that? No.
Right.
It's like implied.
Right.
Like you kind of go, well, if he says that the top, that OT8 or whatever means that you are at cause over matter, energy, space, and time, or that L11 is your exterior at will, blah blah, permanently, blah 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 blah.
That's right.
How could he possibly figure that out if he didn't do it?
Exactly.
So it's just kind of one of these things of, oh well, he must have those abilities,
right?
Because if he didn't have those abilities, how is it that he is saying that you can now achieve those abilities by doing what I say?
Right.
Well, then, did he not do it himself to be able to say, you better do what I say?
Right.
That it's like...
Right.
It's like this logical sequence of thought, but you don't really think about that.
Yeah.
It just kind of comes, osmosis through the walls and the people and the books and the materials.
So for me, it was that exact same thing, combined with the fact that growing up from a very young age, I was constantly seeing people who did these levels, finished the levels, and then in their success story that they gave, attested to having attained those results.
Right.
I have never observed anyone finish an OT level or an L rundown. There's 3 series of auditing actions called L10, L11, and L12, and they're just special rundowns. I've never seen someone finish those rundown and give a success story that was like, you know what, I didn't get exactly what I was hoping for, but it was great. It was great anyway for all these other reasons. No. They are always, this was the most amazing thing I have ever done in my lifetime and in the last a trillion years. And I achieved stable exteriorization at will. It's bullshit. I mean, I think in your heart you know it's bullshit, but in your heart you're also going, oh my God, I wish I could have that for myself.
Right.
So I don't want to say it's bullshit because then I'm admitting I will never have that. And this is really the mind trip, because hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people have finished these OT levels and finished these L rundowns and gotten up on stage in front of a room full of Scientologists and says, I got exactly what LRH said I was going to get out of this rundown, even though they didn't. Like when you finish the L rundowns, the 3 of them, part of the end result is supposed to be fully and stably full stable exteriorization.
Right.
Well, that means you're out of your body 100% of the time.
Right.
I've never met a Scientologist who's ever been able to convince me they've ever been outside of their body. And I'm harping on this a little bit because this is what keeps people in Scientology. Right?
It's one of the things.
It's one of the things, but it's one of the most important because it's kind of like if a Christian were afraid to leave the church because they truly believe they would go to hell for eternity. In Scientology, you believe that LRH has achieved these states. You're also aware that, to the best of our knowledge, we're only aware of this lifetime. We don't remember our previous lives and whatnot. And if you truly believe that someone has already walked the path of being able to remember all of your lives forever and not forget what happens every time you die, then you don't give a shit what kind of criticisms the world has to levy against L. Ron Hubbard. You don't give a shit if there are criminal investigations into the activities of the church. It's easy to go, look, there might be some bad apples, but we're not going to throw away the only chance to ever achieve eternal memory and freedom from the physical form because of some noise. right? And it's also what makes people afraid to leave Scientology, because usually when people are in the church and they start experiencing abuses, they start seeing abuses of the ethics process, abuses of auditing. They're seeing abuses, but they still believe in Scientology.
Right.
So what's going to make you walk out the door on any given day? If you think that Scientology is the only thing that can give you what Scientology has promised to give you, that's what people will put up with. People will put up with almost anything.
Right.
And it's not until people are pushed to the
And turn
brink.
over enormous amounts of money for it.
Right.
I mean,
and usually, I think there's an apparency that a lot of the high-profile guys who've left and a lot of the lower-profile guys who've left, that they get to a point where they're just fed up and they walk out and they're like, leave me the fuck alone, don't ever talk to me again. That's not how it happens. That's not how it happened with me. It's usually, and I'm not trying to make a broad sweeping generality, but I'll take me and my family members and people I intimately know about. They're usually pushed to a point where they hold their ground on some issue, but they're not trying to leave Scientology. So this might be about disconnection. They're holding their ground that they shouldn't have to disconnect from X person. And they're saying, this is an injustice, this is an injustice. And yet, they're also hoping to be able to handle it so that everything's fine. And then eventually the church says, no, it's not fine, and we're going to give you the final ultimatum, we're going to kick you out. And it's devastating. But then that person also has the time and the freedom to start looking and reading stuff they've never been able to look at and read before. And then they realize gradually, oh, that shouldn't have been so devastating to me. What's more devastating is that I stayed for so long. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, exactly.
People don't just go running for the door after, 10 or 20 years in Scientology. They usually end up being kicked out by fighting a fight they would never had any chance of winning. And then they have the freedom to actually see the truth of what was happening the whole time. That was certainly true for me. I fought until the bitter end to not get kicked out of Scientology. Now, you and some other key executives from international management are the exception to that rule, where it got so bad, you just walked out the fucking door.
Well,
but you still believed when you walked out the door. That's
yes.
how bad it got.
That's true.
You left anyway.
Exactly.
Right.
Because it was intolerable to me, and there was nothing worse in my mind than carrying on doing what I was doing and being subjected to what I was being subjected to.
Right.
So it was like, I think Mark Hadley said it once. He said, kill me. I'll die rather than carry on doing this.
Right.
That's the sort of level that you reach of desperation, and you don't want to not be a Scientologist.
Right.
You're sort of, it's this horrible push and pull of, you feel like there is something good about Scientology, you don't want to get rid of that, but there's all this bad that's happening and you can't tolerate it anymore, and so what do you do?
Right.
And I think that that's pretty much a true thing for everybody.
Right.
Like, I think that there are exceptions to the rule, but as a generality, I think that's pretty true. And only once you then have sort of separated yourself from that world or that bubble, do you then start analyzing, wait a minute, this doesn't seem, if this is wrong, well, maybe that's wrong. And if that's wrong, maybe this is wrong. And if, it just starts you down that slippery slope that really has no bottom of figuring out what sort of mindfuck there is that you've been involved in.
Right. Yeah, and when you said you don't want to not be a Scientologist, when I said I fought until the bitter end not to get kicked out of Scientology, that wasn't even because I wanted to do auditing so badly. That was because I didn't want my life to be turned upside down. I didn't want my friends and my family and my job to go away.
Right.
And that has nothing to do with whether you even believe in Scientology. So even if you don't believe in Scientology, you have an incentive to stay in Scientology, right?
Very true.
Okay, good. Let's see what else we got here. Clearing the planet. Growing up in Scientology, what did you think that even meant?
When I was very young, I thought it meant making everybody clear.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I thought.
Right.
And then I wasn't so sure after that. Like later on when I was in the Sea Org, what does this really mean? Does it mean having Dianetics and Scientology so pervasive that, you know, there's not going to be a horrifying Armageddon of World War III caused by people's reactive minds?
Right.
And that the world will be sane enough by reason of enough eradication of the reactive minds of individuals in charge that will never happen. And, you know, like it was always kind of vague. Never really made a whole lot of sense, and it never really, you know, it's funny, like when I was there, I never really, it was like a slogan, not something that I gave a lot of thought to, but it was kind of like a, you know, make America great again, clear the planet. Like, what does this mean?
Right.
It doesn't really have any meaning unless you can attach the particular actions or results or whatever to accomplishing that.
Right.
You can't just keep saying it.
Right.
But actually you can.
Yeah.
It becomes a catchphrase that people, like in Scientology, this is a thing that people say.
Right. We're trying to
clear the planet. We're clearing the planet. Planetary clearing is becoming a reality. Planetary clearing is a reality. Planetary clearing will be a reality. It's always something in the future. I mean, it's like something to put there as a big overall purpose for everybody to get behind.
So it's funny because you spent so much time in the Sea Org. I spent much less time in the Sea Org. Now, Scientology's purpose, they say, is to clear the planet. That's not actually the purpose of the Sea Org. The Sea Org says its purpose is to put in ethics on the planet so that clearing the planet can occur.
Correct.
But it is interesting that the purpose of the entire group is to clear the planet, and yet the members of that group do not have a clear definition of what the fuck that even means.
I know. That's why I analogized it to make America great again. It's like it becomes a catchphrase, and it sounds great. I mean, to Scientologists, clearing the planet sounds like the most wonderful thing. But
Right.
what is it?
Right.
What does? There's no definition for it. There's certainly no progress toward it.
Right.
Although they keep telling themselves that next week's thing is going to be what's going to make that a reality.
Finally open the door to planetary clearing.
Like 3 years ago, it was superpower was it. That was the solution to planetary clearing. After 30 years of sitting in a fucking mothballed closet and not being released, now it was going to be released, and this will be planetary clearing. Ideologues are going to make the sump is going to make planetary clearing. Everything's going to make it a reality, and nothing else has any impact on it whatsoever. But people inside the bubble keep hanging on to, we're clearing the planet, planetary clearing. It's like a mantra.
Right. So here's my evolution of understanding of what that phrase was supposed to mean. When I was younger, I thought, like you said, just auditing every single person on the planet to clear. Never mind the fact that it takes a dedicated Scientologist absolutely years, sometimes, of auditing to achieve the state of clear.
Right.
And there aren't that many auditors in Scientology, which is ironic because that's all Scientology exists for. Okay, then, while I was training at Flag, that understanding evolved into, no. You don't have to audit everyone to clear. All you have to do is tip the theta to n theta ratio on planet Earth so that the dwindling spiral, because dwindling spiral is a phrase L. Ron Hubbard uses a lot, that the world is in a dwindling spiral. It just gets worse. It's unstoppable. And that Scientology exists to reverse the dwindling spiral. So the concept is that theta is just, I guess, positive life force. It's the force, and then n theta is the dark side. Yes?
Correct.
Okay. And so that on this world...
And I'm Yoda. But you're Darth Vader because you're in black.
Thank you. on this world, due to the reactive minds of the collective many, there's more N theta than theta.
Yeah.
But as Scientologists go up the bridge, and as more people get introduced to Scientology, there's a certain amount of theta that gets generated just by people recognizing the truth of Scientology, regardless of auditing or whatever. And that as more and more people get on the OT levels, it's releasing massive quantities of theta. And that eventually, once you get more theta than N theta, you've reversed the dwindling spiral. Now, you may have a long way to travel back up to where we want to be, but the spiral's been reversed, and that is the definition of finally having a cleared earth. And then that also further evolved into, later on, my understanding that on OT7, you're not auditing yourself, you're auditing body thetans. You're auditing thetans that are stuck places, and that one person auditing on OT7 could audit and clear through a little auditing process thousands and thousands or tens of thousands of thetans in the process of auditing on OT7.
Yeah.
And then we were told that all you had to have was 10,000 Scientologists who have completed OT7 and
On or completed. Ever on.
And that will reverse, that will tip the theta and theta ratio on planet Earth and reverse the dwindling spiral. I mean, this is how fucking technical this explanation got, right? And this is partially why Scientologists don't feel like they have faith. Scientologists, as a Scientologist, I never feel like I believed Scientology. I felt like the truth of it was self-evident. It wasn't faith. At least other religions will say, no, this is our faith. I never felt like I was in a faith. Because this shit was explained like it was science.
Right.
But then when you think about it, when I gave a little more thought to it, I was like, so wait a second. If all you need is 10,000 people on or completed with OT7, and if technically that doesn't matter whether they paid for it or not, right?
Like all the Sea Org members are now on OT7.
Yeah, there's more than 10,000 people who are literally working for the church on staff in organizations and in the Sea organization. So why wouldn't you just shut the doors for 3 to 5 years, get all of those people through OT7, and accomplish what you say you're trying to accomplish, which is a cleared earth? You don't need any money at this point to do that, and yet it's not being done.
Well, it's the same question as, well, if the solution to this is to get all logs to ideal, why not just spend $1 billion of the $3 billion that you've got and make them all ideal?
Right.
Why not pay people to come and even be on staff?
Right.
Like, why not give it all away for free? Why not spend all this accumulated capital that you have, either in terms of money or people,
right,
to accomplish what you say you're trying to accomplish?
Right. And it's these little things that when you're in it, when you're in Scientology intensely on a daily basis, whether you're a public Scientologist or a staff member, you just don't have time or an incentive to think about things like this.
Well, incentive. I mean, you've got to be very careful about what you think about,
right,
because you're going to end up being sec-checked over it.
Right.
Like, you can't start having bad thoughts. I mean, seriously, I know that sounds ridiculous.
No, it's true.
You cannot have bad thoughts about things. You can't have bad thoughts about L. Ron Hubbard. You can't have bad thoughts about David Miscavige. You can't have bad thoughts about Scientology, or am I being told the truth, or is this really real, or whatever. Right. It's like, you can't do that
yeah,
and continue. So it's that same... You are constantly being confronted with that question: should I or shouldn't I?
Right.
What am I going to lose? What is the cost benefit ratio of? And it goes from leaving the Sea Org, or leaving Scientology, or leaving staff, or having bad thoughts.
Right.
It's all they're just harmonics of the same question of. What's the upside, what's the downside, and there's a hell of a lot of downsides that have been built into that system.
Right. You know, I recently read 1984 and Animal Farm.
So did I.
They were books that LRH frequently referred to in his early lectures because he positioned Scientology as the tool that would prevent an Orwellian society from coming into existence.
Right.
And so it's this weird sort of kind of positive reinforcement loop in Scientology where he talks about these things, the Orwellian world, as being distasteful, and Scientology as being the tool to prevent that. But when I read these books, I was like, have any Scientologists actually fucking read these books? Because they're basically about Scientology, right? Like, what LRH said he was trying to prevent from coming about, he created. Yeah, intentionally or otherwise. That can be debated. But
it's the same thing with hypnotism.
Right. I mean, the thought police is from 1984. The thought police is what Scientology has become. LRH actually jokingly would use this phrase, all men are created equal, some are just created more equal than others. And he would say that phrase as if Scientologists were better people than other people. That's a phrase from Animal Farm. I thought LRH created that phrase. And then I read the book, I was like, what the fuck? I was like, that's supposed to be a bad thing. That's supposed to be a fascist type thing, you know? Anyway. All right. Slight tangent there. Okay, so that was clearing the planet. What was Scientologist? What were you talking about people? Okay. I want to jump to talking about just some more standalone kind of topics. So, back when the shooting happened at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando,
Yeah.
I remember you and I had said, we got to sit down and do a little video discussing Scientology's actual take on gays, homosexuality, and their public position, and just sort of set the record straight on that. So I'll just let you take the lead. How do you characterize Scientology's? How do you characterize Scientology's official stance on homosexuality?
Their official stance is, like many other official stances that the church takes, is a PR position. It's not what Scientologists really believe. Scientologists do believe that being homosexual is low on the tone scale. That it is 1.1, chronically 1.1 on the tone scale, which, according to Hubbard, is the worst tone level, chronic tone level, for anybody to be in, and that Scientology is designed to raise you up the tone scale. So by definition, Scientology is supposed to cure being homosexual. Because if it raises you from 1.1 chronic tone level, that means that you're no longer going to be a homosexual, because homosexuals are at 1.1 on the tone scale.
So 1.1 on the tone scale, is that, what does it say? Does it say homosexual? It's 1.1?
Yeah.
No. What it means, the emotional tone level of 1.1 in Scientology is called covert hostility. And the little graphic, because there's a pictorial representation of these tone levels, is someone smiling to your face and holding a knife behind their back.
Right.
Covert hostility. And that is where Scientology puts homosexuality.
Correct.
And even though...
Very clear. I mean,
right.
It's not... this is not a point of dispute.
Right.
This is not a point that is like, oh, well, yeah, maybe, but that's not really what it says, or, you can interpret it differently. That's exactly what it says on the Chart of Human Evaluation,
right,
written by L. Ron Hubbard, that cannot be changed and cannot be altered.
Right.
And Hubbard has this quote in Science of Survival about, dispose of put all the 1.1s on a boat and dispose of them without sorrow or whatever, like that will improve society. You can argue about that, about whether that's allegorical, whether that's saying, inciting people to go and kill off 1.1s, which I don't think it really is.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you cannot argue about the fact that 1.1 equates to homosexuality equates to 1.1
right,
in Scientology, and that L. Ron Hubbard says that 1.1 is the worst tone level to be in, and even though it's not the lowest...
Right, it's not the lowest, but somehow it's the worst.
It's the worst.
Right.
And that Scientology is designed to raise people up and to change those... Like, the theory is that as you move up the tone scale, these artificial significances that Hubbard developed, that you change your characteristics to match what the description of them is across this chart of human evaluation. So if you are, have difficulty, with some aspect of your life that's described at that particular tone, if you raise the tone level, you will no longer have that affliction. You will now be operating at the next tone level up or tone level down.
Your behavior improves as your tone level improves.
Exactly.
So, to be thorough here, it's not that all 1-1s are gay, or that you have to be gay to be 1-1, but all gays are 1-1.
Correct.
Per LRH.
Correct.
Right. And so you could be a straight person but be 1-1. You could be, like you said, 1-1 is supposed to be a level in the emotional tone scale that has certain attitudes and behaviors associated with it. It just so happens that being gay is considered an attitude or behavior that is inextricably associated with being 1-1 on the tone scale.
Correct.
Now, some people might go, but there's gay people in Scientology, and there's even gay celebrities in Scientology. What do you say to that?
And probably those people are being addressed by Scientology and the Scientology technical people to cure them of their gayness.
Exactly.
I mean, that's reality.
Right. Scientology does not have a problem including people in its membership who it considers undesirable.
As long as they got money.
As long as they have money. True. I mean, the only crime, slight segue. Whenever the church puts out a PR statement on Leah Remini, they say that she was on the verge of being expelled due to ethical lapses. Nobody's ever been expelled from Scientology due to ethical lapses in the history of Scientology. The only lapse you could commit is to say something bad about Scientology.
Correct.
Because
or have no money.
That's true. But
that is true.
They won't kick you out, though. They'll just won't call you.
Yeah, but you could make an ethical lapse, and if you've got no money, you're done.
True. That's true.
Like, if you've got money, there is no... Put it that way. If you have money, there is no ethical lapse that you could engage in that would result in you being thrown out of the church.
That's right. Because what they will do is they will say, we understand that your inability to stop molesting children is due to your reactive mind and your hidden evil purposes that you've had for trillions of years. So we are going to help you with auditing.
Right. That'll
be $50,000, please. And as long as you're paying up, they're like, no, we're helping him. Like, why would we cast him away? We're here to help people. We don't frown on sinful behavior. We're here to reform sinful behavior for the right price.
Correct.
Right. And so that's how Scientology also views people who have problems with homosexuality.
Correct.
This is someone here who is suffering from their reactive mind, and we're just going to audit them. Now, I have known people who were gay, actually openly gay, who were permitted to get all the auditing necessary up to the state of clear and allowed to attest to the state of clear. But someone who is openly gay, or maybe not openly gay, but let's say practicing, right, will never be allowed on Scientology's OT levels, ever.
These days.
Okay, true. Because back in the day, yeah, that's right, these days. And I just knew of one guy in particular, I just won't name his name, who didn't actually know that this is why he wasn't being allowed onto the OT levels. He was gay, he attested to clear, and he was just being programmed for auditing actions that just relentlessly was dealing with his evil purposes on all of his different areas of life. It's called the false purpose rundown. You just audit, false purpose means evil purpose, and you just take every little wrong thing they've ever done and find out the earliest time they ever did something like that up to trillions of years ago, and then find out what evil purpose and destructive intention they had that prompted them to steal that paperclip. And the idea is that if you clear someone and they're still gay, then the problem is their evil purposes.
Right.
So you can audit them forever on their evil purposes until they become not so interested in being gay anymore. And then maybe they have to prove they can go without practicing homosexuality for a couple years, and then they'll be allowed onto the OT levels. But nobody will actually say that to a public Scientologist.
Correct.
Nobody will say, hey, listen, we got to talk about this gayness. You're not going to be on the OT levels. They're like, no, because if you tell him that, then he will maybe pretend not to be gay to get on the OT levels. You have to just keep auditing his evil purposes, and then he will really become not gay anymore. And then, when we've proven that Scientology has worked on this person, then we'll let him onto the OT levels. This is how seriously Scientology considers the offense of being gay. So, because it's been written about in the press, I'll just mention it. Catherine Bell is publicly living with a woman, in a relationship with a woman. I haven't seen her featured in many Scientology mags, but she's still a Scientologist, right? She's still a Scientologist. Catherine Bell's been a Scientologist for decades. She knows what Scientology thinks about being gay.
Right. And
yet she, in recent memory, divorced her husband and moved in with another Scientology woman, and they're in a relationship. And this has already been written about. I'm not outing anybody. How do you process that?
Well, part of the process of that is that, say what you want, celebrities get treated differently. They just do. The rules are always bent when it comes to celebrities.
Mm-hmm.
And you have got to go the extra step, the Leah Remini route of, you know what?
Right.
Screw you all. This is a bunch of bullshit, and I'm not putting up with it anymore. As long as you're willing to generally be quiet and not create a stink, if you're a celebrity, you can kind of do whatever you want. Tom Cruise, even though he's not supposed to, connect with Suri in any way, shape, or form because she's connected to an SP. If Nicole and Katie aren't directly SPs, they're SPs because of their parents, and they're connected to their parents because, Nicole's dad is a psychologist and Katie's dad is a lawyer that handled her divorce and blah, blah, blah. All of these things that for a normal Scientologist would be, you're done, man.
Right.
You're out. You can stay connected, but you're out. We're declaring you. He doesn't have to do that. I would imagine that the same thing applies to Catherine Bell. Now, if Catherine Bell became a big problem, or a scandal, or she started speaking out, then the next thing you would see would be Scientology saying, well, she was on the verge of being expelled for her ethical lapses.
Right.
They're going to hang on to that as a way of, in some time in the future, if she ever decides that she wants to go off the reservation, they'll plaster her with, she was always a problem. We were going to kick her out, but out of the goodness of our hearts, we didn't do it, and blah, 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 blah.
Right. So it's not out of the question, and again, I don't have any inside knowledge here. I'm not trying to elude anything, but it seems like it wouldn't be out of the question if Catherine went to the ethics officer or somebody more senior and said, look, I'm going to live my life the way that I want to. I'm tired of not being true to myself. I'm not going to speak out against Scientology. I'm not even departing Scientology. I'm happy to come on course. I still consider myself a Scientologist, but I'm going to live my life the way I want to live my life, and I'm going to continue to be a friend to you. That they would just be like, cool, leave you alone. No making a fuss. Now, if Catherine Bell appeared in some magazines that were targeted to the gay community and started promoting Scientology to the gay community and saying Scientology is gay friendly, go into the church would be like, knock that shit off, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Although, I don't know. I mean, maybe they wouldn't because maybe they figure that this is a source of income.
Well, let me tell you something. This guy that I was talking about who attested to Clear, even though he was openly gay, he tried to get a Way to Happiness campaign going in West Hollywood. And he had the Way to Happiness printed up with the rainbow symbol and everything, and wanted to distribute the Way to Happiness logo to the gay community with the rainbow flag on it. And RTC stepped in and said, not a fucking chance, and nixed it. And anyone associated with it was sent to ethics, and it was a problem. They wouldn't even let the Way to Happiness be distributed in West Hollywood with the rainbow flag on it.
Yeah, okay. Well, there's no money.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Whatever. And this is a lot of speculation. So, but the truth of the matter is the Church of Scientology and Scientologists that are inside that bubble of the Church of Scientology look upon gays with sort of knowing pity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these poor people, they're suffering because of their cases.
Right.
That this is what causes them. And that's probably the nicest characterization of it.
Right.
Other than that is probably, if you get all the way up to Miscavige,
it's different.
It's very different.
Okay, as usual, we could go on forever. Let's see if there's anything else we want to just jump in on here. Oh man, so much of this I want to cover. But, okay, you mentioned on your blog recently that there are some actual positive changes that have occurred in the church as a result of the public exposure and public conversation that's been had about Scientology over the last couple or many years.
Right.
The one I can remember off the top of my head is about abortion, right? A lot of stories about forced abortions in the Sea Org. Anyone who's spent any time in the Sea Org knows that an abortion is just something you're expected to do.
Right.
Are you tied down to a table and forcefully given an abortion? No. An abortion is just something all Sea Org members are expected to do. You signed a billion-year contract. You're not allowed to have kids in the Sea Org. 1 + 1 = 2.
Right.
But that's not quite... that's not really happening much these days in the Sea Org, is it?
I don't think it happens at all.
I can pretty much say that it doesn't. Because anyone in the Sea Org today who is pressured to get an abortion and gets an abortion is someone who could leave the Sea Org next year and talk about it.
Correct.
I know that when my wife, I met my wife in the Sea Org, and so we had our first kid in 2006, 2007. When we found out she was pregnant, we went right to the ethics officer, we were in different orgs, our respective ethics officers, and I know I said, okay, Heather's pregnant, and we're not getting an abortion, and so we're leaving. And they were like, okay. Got out the little paper routing form of the series of steps to do to leave, and we were on our way. We waited. You have to get a sec check before you leave the Sea Org, so a little interrogation on the e-meter. We waited about 3 to 4 weeks to get that sec check, but it also coincided with the time when like half the base was sick with the flu, and we had our own private room that we stayed in. So we stayed in our room for like 3 to 4 weeks, and then when it finally came time to get the sec check, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, like our entire process of leaving the Sea Org, aside from the 3 to 4 weeks that we waited to do the process, took hours, not days. They do not want pregnant people walking around the base. They do not want people who are pregnant and leaving talking to other Sea Org members. And that was 10 years ago. So I can imagine, but what was happening at that time, but we didn't know it because we were in the bubble of the Sea Org. What was happening at that time is there was starting to be a lot of public backlash against the church, a church for forcing its clergy to get abortions, which is so anti-religious based on the American concept of that it was a problem. So the reforms that are happening are as a direct result of public exposure. I feel like there was 1 or 2 other things that you mentioned in your blog that...
I don't think the whole exists anymore.
Right. Exactly.
I think that physical assaults on people have probably been curtailed to being virtually nothing.
Right.
I think that's too much of a liability. I mean, for a while there was a ban on people getting married because they were afraid that if people got married, they get pregnant, and that because they can't stop abortion, can't pressure people into having abortions. This was at the nth base.
Right.
You know, that eventually that got relaxed, and you know, people were allowed to get married again after 4 years or something.
Right.
I think that ultimately the biggest thing that has to change is the disconnection, and that is going to require a lot more than just a few stories being told here and there, or a little bit of negative publicity. I mean, they've had a lot of negative publicity already. I'm not saying that negative publicity isn't going to be effective, but that is a core. You know, it's relatively easy to change the abortion thing because in the overall scheme of things, it doesn't have that big an impact on what's happening from the perspective of Miscavige and the management of the church. Get rid of disconnection and you lose control of everybody.
Right.
Because it is a mechanism of control. And so that's much more difficult to get, you know, to reform. But eventually it will. Right. I mean, eventually that will happen. Enough outcry, enough social pressure, enough political pressure, it will be forced to change.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Okay, last thing that we'll tease in this video, and then we'll wrap it up. So, something that's going to be getting a lot more exposure over the next year or two is the subject of child sex crimes in Scientology. And we're not going to get into any specific case stories right now, but what I wanted to do was sort of...
As opposed to our pornography filming?
Okay, fine. I'll have to mention it. Okay, so Leah Remini's got her A&E show coming up, and so she spent a couple days here interviewing me. You were here, and then magically, you know, there were some gear trucks out front, some lighting trucks. Magically, the rumor around the neighborhood in the next week was that we'd been filming a porn. Now, at first I was flattered. I was like, was I the on-screen talent, or was I, you know...
long gone?
But I'm like, okay, what was it about, you know, my picket fence wife, 3 daughters, and 2 dogs that screams porn studio? I don't really doubt that rumor was started by some of the local Scientologists who were encouraged to do that. No, but here's the thing. So... I asked you the question recently, and just give me the same answer. I just want to get it on camera. I thought that there was a chance that because of the religious priest-penitent aspect of that religions are granted and that Scientology has, that if someone confessed to sexually assaulting a child, that there would be no burden to disclose that fact to the authorities. Is that true?
No.
Why?
That is not.
Why?
Because there are presumptions in the law that protect children. And that is a senior concept. The protection of children is almost above anything else in the law. And I think that this goes state by state, and I think it's different in different states. But generally, if you become aware, no matter how, whether you're there is a very strong presumption that a doctor-patient relationship is pretty impenetrable.
Mm-hmm.
Or
what about a psychiatrist? I mean, that's a
psychiatrist has the same obligation. I believe that in many places if you become aware and believe that there has been child abuse that has occurred, you have an obligation to report it.
Do you believe, and I know you're not a lawyer, but you can play one here. Do you believe that applies to simply, I say simply, to statutory rape as opposed to forced rape? I understand it's statutory for a reason, that you can't consent, but you know what I mean. There's a difference between a 16-year-old or 15-year-old and a 9-year-old.
I actually don't know the answer to that, Aaron.
Okay.
I suspect not. I suspect that is presumed to be the responsibility of the state to determine whether that is actionable or not actionable, and therefore the presumption is always to the benefit of the child.
Oh, when you said you expect not, you mean you expect there's not an exemption for statutory rape?
I expect there is not.
So I know.
But I don't really know, and I don't want anybody to get
I get it.
I haven't made any study of this, but frankly, now there are more and more people that are coming forward with stories about this, and I believe that as this show now airs, there's going to be even more.
Right.
And just literally in the last few weeks, I have had emails, or Leah has had emails from 4 different people who are telling stories about the sexual abuse that they suffered in the Sea Org.
Right. So, remember I mentioned that when my wife and I left the Sea Org, what we weren't aware is that there was blowback the church was experiencing that we were not aware of, that was resulting in internal changes.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the Sea Org when the church started to, when the organization I was working in, and all of the organizations on the PAC base in Los Angeles, basically received instructions that we were to change how we were handling it when people confessed to having sex with minors and auditing. Now, not raping minors, statutory rape. They were to be routed out of the org. It was not something you just said, well, you got off and over in auditing, so it's protected. These people were considered to be a threat to the security of the church when they made these confessions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that doesn't mean they were reported to the authorities. It was covered up, hushed up, get the person off of auditing lines so we don't have to keep hearing them say that they've done these things. And it might even be that the person was barred from doing OT levels or something like that. But it was to protect the church,
right?
Not to enforce the laws of the land or to get this person rehabilitated or whatever. There was a specific point in time around 2005, 2006 where people who had in the past admitted to having sex with minors had to be at least kept off lines until I don't know if there's a statute of limitations or whatever it is, but they started to get very sensitive to it.
Well, there was a lawsuit or a case that was filed in California, mm-hmm. in San Francisco, and unfortunately I can't remember the name of the case, but it was pretty famous, of a woman who was sexually assaulted in a mission, I think it was. And
a Scientology mission.
Yeah, Scientology mission. And my recollection is that it was sometime around that time period, and probably is what I mean, usually, as you know, those edicts that get, okay, this is how things get handled now, this is what is to be done, result from some flap somewhere.
Some legal threat.
Some legal threat somewhere.
Right.
And something happened, and so now everybody has to sign releases. Now everybody that ever talks about having had sex with a minor has to be gotten out of the org. Now at Flag, anybody that has a heart condition isn't allowed to stay on the property.
Right.
All of those things are as a result of some legal flap that happened, right. And I would imagine that's probably that. I never heard that before.
Right. The church has a policy of never, ever, ever reporting a Scientologist to the authorities under any circumstances. I know that's true Scientologist. If you as a Scientologist broke into my home, say you're just wasted drunk and broke into my home, and I called the police on you, I would be expelled from Scientology. Because by putting another Scientologist into the justice system, you have embarrassed Scientology or put Scientology at risk, because you could then go on the stand and be like, Scientology made me do it. Or someone could question you about your involvement in Scientology while you're on the stand. I have never experienced the church. So I said Scientologist to Scientologist. I've also never observed the church calling the authorities or involving the authorities in any issue relating to a parishioner. Right? So the reason I'm saying this is the church has a policy preventing involving the authorities. The church also has thousands and thousands and thousands of minors working for it. There are scores, hundreds of examples of sexual abuse of children that have not been reported to the authorities and have been intentionally covered up. And I would go so far as to say I'm not aware of one instance where the church has involved the authorities.
Well, I am.
Huh?
However, what happens after that is if you're in a position, or where someone gets in a position where they feel like they must report it because the law says they must, they then go to the parents and get the parents to agree not to press charges. So the authorities have no way of prosecuting the person because the parents have been convinced by an ethics officer or OSA or whoever to not press charges against the perpetrator of the crime on all the same bases. It will be embarrassing to the church. If you put someone in the hands of the woke justice system, they're going to end up in a psych ward. That, justice, the only true justice in the world can happen inside Scientology. You're going to bar them from ever being cured of the real cause of their aberration that they want to molest children, which is auditing. And like this then becomes a quick circle the wagons so that there is no prosecutor can bring a case if he doesn't have a victim.
Right.
Or the parents, in this case, of victims, willing to testify.
Right.
Children can't testify.
Right.
So I am aware of that, and it's one of the stories that I think should really be told. It's always difficult because you have, it's something that happened a long time ago. And you have to consider the well-being of the children that were involved, and is it better for them to have this all dragged up again?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like there's a lot of factors that go into this, and do they want to be have the publicity? Do the parents want to get it?
Totally. Yeah,
so
it's a problem. It's a problem.
It is, but I agree with you. This is a hidden, sordid side of the Scientology story that hasn't really been touched upon by anybody.
Right. Particularly when some of the minors involved are immigrants from other countries who have overstayed their visas because their passports are taken and they're not allowed to go home and shit like that. It's like human trafficking and child abuse.
Right.
And the church feels like it's above the law. I know when I was a Scientologist, I felt like the church and all of us were also above the law. The law is for those other people.
Laws.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, good. Well, we're going to leave it at that. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed this content. We're going to try to put these out a little more often than we have been. I think it's been over 6 months since our last one. We've got so much more to cover, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.